evening, everybody, and welcome to Carving It Up Live right here on Facebook, as well as the Carving It Up YouTube channel and the Grid Network YouTube channel. As always, I am Bryson Carver. We're live to you right now from Disney World. Like I said, we're going to be here for the next few months leading up to around middle of May. So, listen, essentially what I'm saying is this is going to be my studio away from home. We have got a show on tap for you guys tonight. So, obviously, we're going to get to the Philadelphia Eagles, who had a pretty incredible run to the Super Bowl, knocking out Green Bay in blowout fashion, surviving at what I thought was a very real Los Angeles Rams team, and absolutely clobbering Washington, getting to them in Saquon. I can't say I'm excited for that segment because, as longtime listeners of the show know, I don't have much for the Philadelphia Eagles. Get to that in about a half hour. In about 15 or 20 minutes or so, Josh Allen, an interesting conversation about him because it's so odd. He's not coming up. I shouldn't say this. His playoff resume is, but he's still amazing. Get to that in 15 minutes. Why do you think he shoulders a big chunk of the blame for the Bills' loss to the Kansas City Chiefs in the AFC title game? Dallas Cowboys hiring Brian Schottenheimer to be their next head man. It is not a validation for me so much as it is a validation for the Jerry Jones football business model. Get to that in about 45 minutes. At the end of today's show, sad news, like not really that sad, but Caitlin Clark not competing against Steph Curry in the NBA All-Star Game three-point shooting contest on All-Star Saturday night. I gotta say, that one depressed me a little bit. Get to that at the end of today's show. But first, man, I've been looking forward to this ever since Sunday night. So, it's weird. The last 72 hours, I've had this mix of emotions. Because on one hand, it's been validation, the emotion of validation, if you will. On the other hand, it's, it's not my team, so it's like I could celebrate it like if the Steelers did something great. But more than anything, what I'm feeling is disappointment. That's going to sound weird. Why do I feel disappointment right now? Because Kansas City winning 32-29 to clinch the AFC for the third consecutive season, doing so over the Buffalo Bills. Get to them and Josh Allen in particular in about 15 minutes. Them doing that should be a validation for me. But I have the way I do my show, and I don't do it every show because I think that would make my show clickbaity, but oftentimes I will have a big kind of out there take that I think something in the future is going to happen. And I have swung and I have crushed it over the ballpark, or out of the ballpark, and I have swung and fell on my behind. An example of the latter would be the Denver Broncos to win the Super Bowl in 2022. Not great. Not one of my better days. Probably the worst take I've ever had. On the other side of that coin would be picking the Lions to go to the NFC title game in 2023, 9 months before they actually did it. And the Warriors winning the 2022 title. Those were out there picks that ended up coming true. Somehow, my Kansas City is the best team in football take actually gets to age really well, not because it ended up happening, but because it actually weirdly falls into the hot take category. I had to spend all season from September to now. We are almost in February. The game will be played Super Bowl 59 on February 9th. I have had to sit here and hear all season long about what's wrong with this team, what's wrong with Patrick Mahomes, what's wrong with this Kansas City Chiefs defense, maybe slightly diminished from a year ago. I've had to hear about the wide receiving core and all the reasons Kansas City won't win the Super Bowl. And for me, it always boiled down to this. Let's see. Of all the contenders in football this year, AFC, NFC, I'm going to take a wild guess and say the team with the best quarterback, second greatest quarterback of all time, one of the greatest coaches of all time, the greatest big game playoff tight end of all time, Sunday notwithstanding, and the best defensive coordinator in the National Football League today, who, by the way, just so happened to have the best record in sports, in the NFL, after winning the last two Super Bowls. I'm going to go out on a limb and say they probably should be the favorite and probably should be regarded as the best team in the sport. Somehow that has not only aged well because I picked it, and by the way, I picked Kansas City before the season to three-peat. It has been narrative after narrative. All the reps and the games are fake. There's the Taylor Swift factor. Folks, they won 2 Super Bowls before Taylor Swift even got there. Okay, the refs factor. We will do a segment on that next week because I want to give that its own segment. Today's the day to give the Kansas City Chiefs their shine. Why would I believe in the Kansas City Chiefs? What about Buffalo? right? Josh Allen's playing clean football, and maybe this team can do something. And the Ravens are more explosive offensively than they were last year. Lamar Jackson, best year of his career. And what about this team? Maybe Houston can actually beat them. Maybe all of these different teams. There was a time my Steelers actually thought I would have had a puncher's chance, and then Christmas Day happened, and I let go of that take. All of these, even in the NFC, the Lions are, I love the Lions. I love me some Dan Campbell. But they're dropping 50 points every fifth game. And it's like, oh, Detroit is better than Kansas City. They couldn't even win a playoff game. And Philadelphia, hey, we'll find out on next Sunday how that matchup materializes. They beat Kansas City last time they faced them in Arrowhead Stadium last year. Time will tell on that one. This team's better than Kansas City. The 49ers are better than Kansas City. And why would I believe in the Chiefs? Well, mostly with respect to Reed, Kelsey, Steve Spagnuolo, who was unbelievable in the fourth down call, it mostly boils down to this. Patrick Mahomes, the playoffs, 17-3 record, 43 touchdowns to 8 interceptions. We'll show you where that ranks all time in just a moment. Completes 67% of his throws, 277 pass yards per game, and a passer rating of 105.8 in the postseason. And we can show you where some of those ranks all time. He's first all time in the playoffs in touchdown to interception ratio. He is first all times. That says pass yards per game. That should say total yards per game. First all time in total yards per game. First in completion percentage. First in passer rating. First in win percentage. And he broke the tie with Joe Montana, the second winningest playoff quarterback ever to, of course, the GOAT himself, Tom Brady, who has 35 wins, which is absurd. Mahomes got a ways to go to catch Tom. There's no question about that. But what we know is, I've always said on my show, when it comes to deciphering who's a contender and who's not a contender, is if I have more questions than I do answers, if I have more uncertainty than certainty about who you are and what you're going to be in the biggest moments, I can't buy into you. Now, if you prove me wrong, great. I can sit up here and give you your flowers. But until that point, I can't do it. That's why young teams don't tend to win championships. Teams with playoff disappointment, players like the Houston Rockets in the James Harden era, like Lamar Jackson, the Ravens, why I don't tend to buy into them, not necessarily as not contenders, but teams I could actually see winning it all. The Vikings with Sam Darnold this year. It's why I bought into a team with the best, not the greatest, that's the difference, best playoff quarterback of all time, the best coach in the league, best defensive coordinator, big game tight end, and all of the narratives that have surrounded this team, all of the nonsense that has surrounded it. I go back to last year because I picked Kansas City to go to the Super Bowl and win the Super Bowl a year ago. I picked them to go back-to-back. And all season long, they were 11-6. You know, there was the problem with this. There was a real problem with guys like Valdez-Scantling and Tony and the drops. It's like, what is going on with this team? I mean, Mahomes is laying it right there on the money. But speaking of Mahomes had kind of a turnover problem for the longest time. What is going on with the Chiefs? They're a significantly lessened version of themselves. I never lost faith that they could win it all last year. I never once said I'm buying stock, or selling stock rather, in the Kansas City Chiefs. Never said that. But I got why people did. Of course I got what people did. They didn't look even close to what they were like in years past. Mahomes had probably the worst season of his career. The receivers weren't very good. Kelsey was a reduced version of himself. The defense was great, but that was really the only consistently great aspect of the Chiefs last year. And then they won it all against an 11-win Dolphins and Bills team, a 13-win Ravens team, and a 12-win Niners team. And after that game, I said, I will not bet against Patrick Mahomes until he gives me a reason to. I will not bet against this dynasty. We know they're a dynasty. That got cemented after they beat the Niners last year, but a team that is on an unprecedented run right now. So no team's three-peated, we know that, but no team's ever gone to the Super Bowl in pursuit of a three-peat. The closest team that came to three-peating was the 1990 49ers, who lost in heartbreaking fashion to the Giants on a fumble. You know, long story. That was the closest one we'd seen, three-peat attempt we'd seen prior to this year's Chiefs team. And when I had to hear about how Lamar Jackson is all of a sudden going to be something that he has never been in his career, and that's a great playoff quarterback and knock off Kansas City. Well, he didn't even get a chance to knock off Kansas City. The idea that the Buffalo Bills, with the inferior quarterback, the inferior coach, the inferior roster, the inferior defense, the inferior everything, not culture, that's not fair. I mean, everybody's an inferior culture, Kansas City, but the inferior football stability, winning close games, whatever you want to call it, The idea that there was a credible argument to put anybody above this Kansas City Chiefs team all season long was laughable. The idea that anybody, I remember the Bills were the favorites for a short period. The Ravens were a favorite this year. Early in the year, the 49ers, I think, were the favorites to win the Super Bowl. Detroit, and I love Dan Campbell. I've been a Lions supporter for almost 2 years. I think they're great. The idea that they should be favored with Jared Goff and Dan Campbell over Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid, it all looks pretty silly today, doesn't it? Rule of thumb in sports, be it the NBA, NFL, college football, or college sports for that matter, any industry, any line of business, anywhere, stop betting against the team that is not only has a history being great, but is still great. I mean, for crying out loud, the Kansas City Chiefs broke their single-season franchise record, or at least in the Mahomes era they did, for wins in a regular season. They went 15-2, top seed in a stacked AFC, and all I had to hear is about, this is wrong with them. Folks, it was jealousy. It was nonsense. It was a disingenuous line of thought that not that this team was going to get the Super Bowl, but that this team should not be given, not even a benefit of the doubt, because they were the best team all season long. Patrick Mahomes not the Pro Bowl, right? How's that going to age years from now? Now, he would have been the first Pro Bowl alternate. Drake May made it, I think, as a Pro Bowl alternate. So did my man Russell Wilson. But you're going to look back, if Kansas City goes on to win the Super Bowl over Philadelphia, it is going to be, we're going to look back, one of the footnotes we're going to see is like, they went 15-2, won their third straight Super Bowl, and Patrick Mahomes was not a Pro Bowler. But Joe Burrow on the 9-8 Bengals team that was the first team out of the playoffs, would have been the second team out of the playoffs 5 years ago. He's better than Mahomes. Every year, Josh is better, Lamar's better. Joe, I know people personally, and I love him dearly, who would take Joe Burrow over Patrick Mahomes. We have lost the plot on this team, and I'm telling you, it is. I hear inevitability. I've heard some people say, the Chiefs were inevitable. The same people were picking Buffalo all year long to knock off this team. If they're inevitable, treat them as if they're inevitable. They're as inevitable as Jordan's Bulls in the 90s, Brady's Patriots in the 2000s and 2010s, and the Warriors in the mid to late 2010s. It's that simple. And so, by the way, if you don't like it, knock them off. Don't get mad at Kansas City for doing what they've been doing for the last 7 years. Get mad at your own team for not knocking them off. Brady and Burrow, the only two guys that can say it. It's why I give Burrow an extra bump in my quarterback rankings, because I'm like, he's the only guy playing that has done it. So it is the idea that their greatness should be distilled to a bad officiating call, or even in the case of the Buffalo game, a catch by Xavier Worthy that was in any other game would be ruled a catch, which it was. And then the Josh Allen fourth down play where it's like, he clearly got it. If they would have given him the first down, would have had no problem with it. If they would have called him short, which they did, I would have had no problem with it. The idea that was just this obvious, again, is intellectually dishonest. This was the best team in football from start to finish, with the best quarterback on earth, coach on earth, defensive coordinator on earth, and best big game playoff tight end in the history of the league. So, am I shocked Kansas City's in the Super Bowl? You asking me that? You asking me that? Stop. This team is always going to get back to the Super Bowl. At least I felt that way. Anybody that thought otherwise, what games were you watching? It's part of the problems we have in the social media era is, I've always said, is the biggest thing that happened, the most important thing that's happened, and the biggest thing that's happened is the thing that happened most recently, because the thing I remember in my head most vividly, recency bias. This team is inevitable. I view them as inevitable from the jump. I get to be the genius today, the guy that was right, just because I went on very basic facts, a very, very basic premise of knowledge of what this team has been for a very, very long time. I don't know. Hey, you know what? Next year, if the Kansas City Chiefs, the 2 seed, go to Buffalo, pick the Bills. Knock yourself out. Pick Buffalo. I don't know. And speaking of which, I think the narrative, and I've talked about this on my show for a couple of years now, that has bothered me as much as any. As a guy who, I've said this on my show before. I don't even hide it. I love dynasties. I do. I love dynasties for the same reason that I love history. I love seeing things that have never been done before. I love seeing successful individuals push the boundaries of what was initially thought impossible. Frankly, I thought that's what we thought was great about America. There might be people from the rest of the world watching the show. That's how I view it as a patriotic American citizen. That here in America, we do things that have never been done before, and we push the boundaries. We send a man to the moon, for crying out loud. That's what we do here in the United States. I wish that same energy, in a way, and again, that's I guess a patriotic energy and a sports loving one might be a little different. But follow me here. I like seeing folks do something that has never been done before. It's as simple as that. And one of the reasons that I got so irritated at the discussion around the Chiefs, especially the last few years relative to Josh Allen, the Bills, and for the record, I want to say this in the front end. If I had an MVP vote today, I've always said I wish MVP postseasons were included for MVPs, but we're in too deep for them to reverse that now. But if the regular season ended, day after week 18 games were done, you gave me an MVP vote, I'm casting my ballot for Josh Allen. I would have. Because I always got on Josh for, my God, dude, you're amazing. Just cut out the mindless mistakes. And he did. He cut them out. The numbers weren't crazy, but the numbers weren't amazing last year. And so I'm like, if you can be the guy who still gives you that upside and just not even cut back on the interceptions, because every quarterback throws picks. Even the best quarterback throw picks. Cut out the mindless errors. And the only guy that is clearly better than you is Mahomes. Outside of that, I would take you over Lamar, take you over Joe Burrow, take you over anybody, except for Patrick Mahomes. And so I want to be clear on that in the front end. And Josh Allen did play solid in this game. But I have absolutely, especially last year when the Bills and Chiefs squared off in the divisional round, I got really, really mad at this is the modern day, the 2020s version of Tom Brady versus Peyton Manning. That drove me insane. Because the Brady-Mahomes comparison, Mahomes is the modern day Brady. Hey, he's chasing Brady all the time. We'll see if he ends up getting there at some point, but he's the modern day Brady. Calling Allen the modern day Manning is a gigantic insult to Peyton Manning. I love Josh Allen. The man's not Drew Brees, much less Peyton Manning. And Drew, you know what I think of Drew? I think Drew's one of the most underrated quarterbacks ever. Peyton Manning, prior to winning his first Super Bowl, was a two-time MVP who arguably revolutionized the way the position is played. By the end of the Brady-Manning rivalry, which was the time Peyton Manning retired, Peyton had beaten Brady more times in the playoffs than vice versa, had 5 league MVPs, most in history, still is, by the way, and had 2 Super Bowl rings to Tom's 4. It would be really hard to make a case for Manning above Brady at that point, but it was the craziest thing you could say. Now it's what Brady did after that just separated from everybody by a pretty healthy margin. We'll see if Mahomes closes that gap over the next few years. He's been in the process of doing so. But Josh Allen has no MVPs. He has never been to a Super Bowl, much less won a Super Bowl. Why should I view him as the modern day Peyton Manning? And to me, I've always defined rivalries as this: is be it players, athletes, teams, whatever, is two guys, 2 teams, whatever, on similar levels where one has at least gotten the other once. One guy has won up the other at least one time. Not only has Josh Allen never won up Patrick Mahomes, but there are 2 things. Number one, Josh Allen is now the first quarterback in the history of the National Football League. This has never happened, folks, to start 0-4 against another quarterback in the postseason. That's never happened before. There's a number of guys who have been 0-3. Brett Favre against Troy Aikman is an example. I think Phillip Rivers against Tom Brady is an example too, if I remember correctly. What else? Elway and Bernie Kosar was 0-3 against John Elway. There are other examples of that out there. No one has ever been 0-4. Josh Allen is now. And so you have that component to it. You also have the second thing, is not just that Allen has never beaten Mahomes in a playoff game. He's never outplayed Mahomes in a playoff game. So how in God's green earth could I call it a rivalry? And we can show you the numbers. AFC title game 2020. Mahomes had more pass touchdowns, fewer turnovers, better completion percentage, better passer rating, better QBR, and he won the game. The all-time great divisional game. It's one of the greatest football games I've ever watched in my life, the greatest quarterback duel I've ever seen, right? We're at the 13-second game. We will be generous to Josh and say that was a draw because they both had 4 touchdowns, they both had 0 turnovers, and Mahomes had more yards than Josh did. But again, Mahomes got the ball start overtime, different overtime rules back then. This game actually prompted the new overtime rules, which I think it was a little odd, but Mahomes had better completion percentage, QBR, and he won the game. So let's call that a draw. And then the last 2 games, folks, it hasn't been close. Allen had more touchdowns and yards than Mahomes in the 2023 divisional, but Mahomes had the better completion percentage, passer rating, QBR, and he won the game. More in this game in just a second relative to Sunday's game. And then on Sunday, Mahomes, more touchdowns. He had that one really brutal turnover in I think, the second quarter. But more yards, better completion percentage, better passer rating, better QBR, and he won the football game. Is that it comes down to this for Josh Allen. For all of the complaining about the officials, which there have been the Houston Texans game I thought was really muddied in terms of the discussion about the officials, but the Texans had legitimate gripes. The Will Anderson play, there were other plays, the Mahomes slide, all of those things were legit gripes. I don't think the Bills have one. You talk about the Xavier Worthy catch. Xavier Worthy has enough control of the ball because he's going to tie up with a Bills player, maintains possession as the ball hits the ground, all that. And then the Josh Allen 4th and short play, people acting like that wasn't 50-50 go either way are lying to themselves because there are angles that would support both arguments. That aside, all of those things happening, Mahomes the Chiefs doing what they do, coming up clutch the 4th, another Mahomes come from behind drive, all of that being said, you know what happened in this football game, folks? Josh Allen had the ball in his hands. He had the ball in his hands, down 3. How much time was left in the game? 3 minutes and 33 seconds. Josh Allen had the ball in his hands from the 30-yard line, from his own 30. Field goal ties it, touchdown wins. Oh, does that sound familiar to a year ago when Josh Allen had the ball in his hands, down 3 after his defense forced a punt on Kansas City. He's got the ball, 8 minutes and change to go, down 3, chance to go tie or win the football game. Now, I'm not saying that Josh, in this recent matchup on Sunday, if the Bills score, that they win the game. Because you know what we know? 13 seconds is enough time for number 15 in red to go down and do something special. But you can't, listen, I've been hard on Josh this segment. You cannot blame him for that 2021 loss. No reasonable person would. He scored 13 seconds left and never touched the ball in overtime. What are you going to do? Right? 4 touchdowns, no turnovers. He was great. So you have that component to it. But he had the ball with a chance to take the lead, send his team to the Super Bowl. Last year, ball in his hands, chance to take the lead, get past the Chiefs finally, and get to the AFC title game. And he fell short both times. This is not the modern-day equivalent. I'll use a cross-sport example. This is not Steph Curry versus LeBron James. This is Steph Curry versus James Harden. And ironically, I've seen some AI images on social media that have put Steph in a Chiefs jersey and Harden in a Bills jersey. This is Steph Curry versus James Harden. Now, Josh is not even close to I don't know if I've seen a playoff choker to the likes of James Harden ever. I've gone on Lamar. Lamar's not that bad. Like, James literally ran from the moment, and in some cases quit in the moment. Josh is nowhere near that discussion. But where it's, man, late in the game, 2 minutes to go, Steph looks loose. He's hitting big shots. He's getting to the rim. He's setting up Clay or Draymond's, delivering a big time pass, and Steph's knocking down the shot. Remember that game 6 when Steph scored 0 in the first half, 33 in the second? Games like that. And then James Harden looks a little tight. Moment's a little too big for him. A little tense. You don't know if he's going to come through. You're pretty sure he's not. That's Josh Allen. Did you see Josh? Again, I try, and I usually fail, but I try not to be a body language expert on the show. But you did see that first drive of the game, right? When Buffalo went 3 and out, when Josh Allen did his darndest to throw an interception on those last 2 throws on 2nd down and 3rd down, threw it right to a Kansas City Chiefs. The second throw should have been picked by 2 Chiefs. Looked tight, looked a little tense body language, was kind of, don't know if he's going to come through here. And even in that last drive, looked a little tight. Even the Spags blitz, not put that more on Buffalo's coaching staff for not knowing, hey, big fourth down situation or third down situation, whatever the case may be, Steve Spagnuolo's come with the blitz. What did he do against Brock Purdy and the Niners in the Super Bowl last year? He came with the corner blitz and Trent McDuffie. Like that's his MO. I'm shocked that Buffalo didn't know that. But it's the different. Josh, it doesn't diminish what I view of him as a quarterback. It only solidifies where I'm like, he's amazing. And he's running into an all-timer. He's running into a Mount Rushmore guy who is, if he wins on Sunday, the context of what Mahomes might do in a week and a half, Tom Brady, the greatest ever, won his fourth Super Bowl at the age of 37. Patrick Mahomes might win his fourth at the age of 29. So, now, we do the on pace. He's on pace to, you can't do on pace necessarily when it relates to championships. Like, it's a year-by-year thing. But some of it is you ran into a legend. Some of it is you ran into a juggernaut to a certain degree. And some of it is, for all of those juggernaut facets and things we take into consideration when picking these games, part of the reason people picked the Bills is because they thought potentially Josh would have the ball in his hands with a chance to win, and he disappeared. That's kind of been his MO for a long time in Buffalo. You need that big play, and with the exception of the 2021 game against the Chiefs, you're always left wanting a little bit more, whereas with Patrick, it's like, oh, yeah, he's got this. It's the same. It's the Brady feeling. If you are going against Mahomes a big game, you're like, okay, we're toast. He's going to get whatever we need. He's going to get it. Field goal, touchdown, whatever. Burn the clock. Heck, burn the clock. He'll do that too. That's what Tom did. Anytime if you're rooting against Tom Brady, like, oh God, oh no, he's gonna do it to us again. That's what we're watching here. Josh Allen is amazing. Patrick Mahomes is a legend, and that's the difference. Whew, I'm fired up today being on the show. My man EJ Savage is in the comments. He said, by the way, Boys of Zone, please subscribe to his show. He's doing some great draft breakdowns. Please check out my man EJ Savage. Does a fantastic job here at the Grid Network. He says, feels way more like an Aaron Rodgers type of player than Peyton Manning. Super talented, but it hasn't broken through yet. Yes, listen, I think Rodgers is the second most gifted quarterback that's ever played the game to Patrick. Because, I mean, in some ways, Mahomes kind of took his cues on how to play the position in this sort of unorthodox way from Aaron Rodgers. That's what makes Mahomes so freakish. It's like the Rodgers talent with the Brady clutch gene, composure, ability to read defenses, all of it. So you have that as well. So I do sort of get that, although, let's be real, Aaron's a 4-time MVP. Like, I think this is going to sound harsh, and I know I just said I hate the on-pace for stuff, but I'm about to do it. Technically speaking, we know the Mahomes is the Brady of the era. I think Lamar Jackson is a very different player, but in terms of how the career is panning out, the Peyton Manning of the era, and Josh Allen is the Phillip Rivers of the era. Now, if you ask me who would you take to start a franchise with, Josh, without thinking twice. But in terms of what he's accomplished, Phillip Rivers never went to a Super Bowl, only went to one AFC title game. You say, oh, what about Josh? Josh went to 2. Okay, so it's not that big of a gap. Neither won an MVP, neither went to a Super Bowl. Phillip, I think, made 8 Pro Bowls. Josh, what is this going to be for Josh? Like 5, I think. So somewhere in that ballpark. That's now, again, I'd take Josh, but that's where we're at right now. EJ, the thing is, the ref who called it short didn't have a view of it and never should have made that call short on replay. You can clearly see his line of vision is blocked. I do agree with that in the sense that the first look that CBS showed where it's like, oh, Josh's body is across the line. Yeah, but is the ball, like, I think it was Chris Jones's helmet or it was a Chief helmet that literally blocked the frame. It's like, I can't see the ball, which is unfortunate in the sense like maybe we could have gotten a more accurate call. I get that, but I think my main gripe, EJ, is not that, oh, they were absolutely 100% correct in overturning the play. Or not overturning play, but saying Josh was short. My take is people acting as if it is obvious on either account, by the way, are lying, because it wasn't. And EJ says the Bills needed to fire their head coach and hire Bill, and he says Bill Belichick, last year. Now they've waited too long. They have to roll out another season with McDermott. Listen, Sean McDermott, I've always said, is, and I don't mean this as a shot because it involves one of my teams, Sean McDermott is the NFL's version of Mark Jackson. Sean McDermott took over an absolute disaster in Buffalo, a team that had not won a playoff game, or maybe even been to the playoffs, if memory serves me correctly, in like 17 years. I mean, they were one of the drugs of the league, the jokes of the NFL, the Buffalo Bills. And he takes over a mess, makes the playoffs year one, has him in the AFC title game by his 4th season. That's kind of Mark Jackson. Mark Jackson took over a Warriors team where, now Josh wasn't there when Sean McDermott was hired, but Steph Curry was there, but Steph had the ankle problems. Clay was young. Draymond had just broken into the league by Mark Jackson's, I think, 2nd year coaching the Warriors. And Mark Jackson took over a dead franchise and helped the players evolve into what they were, into becoming one of the all-time dynasties in sports history. He set the building blocks. And then Steve Kerr took it over. But again, because Mark had some holes as it relates to he put Steph on the ball a little too much. They didn't move the ball that well. Draymond wasn't as used. But here comes Steve Kerr. He comes in. It's, again, kind of a Doug Collins situation, like develop the player, just couldn't get the player to all-time heights. I think that's Sean McDermott. Sean McDermott's a guy who's able to develop a culture. And if Sean McDermott were on the market today, I think he'd be one of the first 2 guys off the board in terms of hires. But not necessarily the guy that you see, oh, yeah, I can see him coaching us to a Super Bowl. I mean, there were 2. I know we're getting to a Sean McDermott conversation, and then we'll go to break, but there were 2 major coaching errors for Buffalo. The first was the Spags, not seeing the Spags blitz coming. Now, maybe, again, I'm no X's and O's guy. There are people immensely more qualified than me to break that stuff down. But even I'm watching, hand to God, watching that 4th down play, and I'm like, Kansas City's going to bring pressure. Like that's Steve Spagnuolo's calling card. He brings pressure on those plays. And the fact they weren't aware that, not only that, but they tush-push Josh Allen 5 times and got 2 of them. And so their tush-push play isn't as clearly as no tush-push play is even close as effective as Philly's. And EJ says, if you're going to win with a defensive-minded head coach, you have to have your defense getting stops in January. He's failed every time against Mahomes when it comes to that. I 100% agree with that because I think the last 3 games, if I'm trying to remember, did Kansas City trail in the 4th quarter against Buffalo in the AFC divisional? The game 2 years ago, the one that was in Buffalo. I know they trailed in the second half. I think they trailed in the 4th quarter. It was like early in the 4th quarter they trailed and ended up, obviously winning the game, as we know. If they did, that would be 3 straight games where Bills have in the 4th and then Mahomes goes down and does what he does. Now, the counterpoint to that would be twofold. Mahomes does that to everybody, A. And B, like there was some stats that kind of showed that were crazy. And B, that his quarterback had the ball in his hands. We can bang on Sean McDermott's defense, but his quarterback had the ball in his hands down through with a chance to go tie or win, and he came up short. I mean, he did. Like that's what happened. So I do agree with that, EJ, in the sense that like it's kind of why I've been hard on Mike Tomlin with my Steelers. It's like if you're the defense-minded motivation guy, why does your team start horribly and get clobbered on the defensive side of the ball every single playoff game? And so that point is more than valid. Last comment, and then we'll go to break. Spags gave them that same look multiple times and dropped the linebackers. Then they sent one linebacker and sent a corner, I believe. Still, Allen rolled right into the blitz side, and as a result, couldn't come back to Shakir, who was open. Yeah, Shakir kind of came out in the flat there. He was the option on the left side. So it's a good point there by EJ. EJ, you may need to do a breakdown of that play and maybe some of the looks that Buffalo showed. Just again, please subscribe. EJ Savage, Boys of His Own. EJ and Ryan, my friend Ryan Flowers, who just celebrated his birthday the other day. Happy birthday to Ryan. Both of them do a fantastic job breaking down film, so please be sure to subscribe to both of their channels and check out their stuff on the Grid Network. All right. Again, we've spent a half hour on Chiefs Bills. Gonna talk Eagles Commanders right after the break, and why Saquon Barkley could be on the precipice of the greatest single season running back year we've seen in NFL history. Stay tuned for that on Carve Up Live right after the break. Welcome back to Carving Up Live. So, I gotta say, this is the last. This is the last comment I'll make, at least because again, we've mostly been doing the show since I've been in Florida. We've mostly been doing the show 1 day a week. Since I've been here. That's mostly going to be the case. Obviously, we'll do a show next week prior to the Super Bowl. May do it right before the Super Bowl. We'll see what happens. Then obviously we'll do a post-Super Bowl reaction, then take a little bit of a break, get into free agency once that gets here, and some NBA stuff, March Madness. You know how it goes. It's the last point I'll make on the Chiefs-Bills game because I want to dive into it a little bit more next week. But I really get irritated at the narratives that surround Kansas City, in part because I've seen it in previous dynasties in the modern social media era, two being the Golden State Warriors and the New England Patriots. So for years, it was for Golden State. It wasn't that they had Steph, KD, Clay, Draymond, and Iguodala. Well, Iguodala wasn't his prime. Iggy's getting his jersey retired, by the way, much deserved. But the four of the greatest players ever, two of the 15 greatest players ever potentially in their prime. It wasn't that they were great, but it was always, there was an illegal screen in the third quarter of Game 7 is the reason that the Warriors won this game. And it would always just be this nonsensical. They'd be like, no, they have the greatest shooter God ever created and the most gifted scorer, arguably, in the history of the league and more. And then for New England, it was all, they called her roughing the passer in the fourth quarter. That's why Tom Brady, all of these things that I'm seeing now with Kansas City. I won't spoil it. Please tune in. Please do to the 8 o'clock spot tonight at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific time. About an hour and a half right after my show. Please check it out. I gotta say, I've been the host of the show. I must admit, I enjoy being a contestant more than being the host. I'll put that out there. I am no fan of the lead today. I am no fan of the lead topic today. That's all I'm gonna say. Just tune in. Just tune in the 8 o'clock spot. I'm giving y'all a promo, Mike Guido, who's gonna be hosting tonight. Shout out to him because he's a big Bills guy. He's a big Josh Allen guy. I'm no fan of the lead. I'm just gonna say that. Okay, so to Philadelphia and Washington now. So listen, for as amazing of a game as Buffalo and Kansas City was, Philly and Washington in the second half especially was kind of a dud. Washington goes down, 18-play drive, kicks a field goal. Saquon Barkley does what Saquon Barkley has done often this year, and we'll talk about him in just a moment. The first play of the game takes it 60 yards to the house on what looked like it should have been no more than like a 15-yard carry. But his quick twitch is unreal. So, quickly on Washington, listen, Jaden we know he was spectacular this year. We know what he did as it relates to helping along with Dan Quinn, along with the new general manager, new ownership that has been there for a couple of years now, being able to lift a Washington franchise certainly out of the depths of football hell that Dan Snyder put them in for over 2 decades. But more than that, I gave Jaden credit for this last week. Taking a roster that I'm like, it's fine. Like, Terry McLaurin's awesome. I love Terry McLaurin. But Zach Ertz is still, we saw this year, pretty darn productive tight end, and Austin Eckler's fine, and they've got some other receivers who are good, and the O-line's pretty good. The defense is kind of bad. It's fine. Is it one of the 4 best rosters in football? The last 4, not even close. And so, listen, they're the key for Washington, the biggest obstacle they're going to face next year and moving forward is, okay, now we know how good Jaden Daniels is. Now we know what this roster could be if they're able to draft well, which they have been, maybe add some pieces in free agency in the trade deadline or before the trade deadline next year. Now they face a little bit what Detroit faced where, okay, now we expect you to be good. Now people are actually like, they're putting a little bit of a star on their schedule this year when they see you there. So going from not necessarily being hunter to hunted necessarily because they didn't win the Super Bowl, but now people expect you to be good. And so we'll see. I'm not saying Washington can't. I'm just saying that's going to be their next challenge because I think Jaden is just unbelievably talented. I loved Jaden out of LSU. I really did. My prediction was Caleb would be the best quarterback, Penix 2, Jaden Daniels 3. And I thought Daniels was going to be excellent in Washington. Could have never seen this coming. So, with that aside, to Philadelphia and to Saquon Barkley in particular. Last week, I compared Saquon to Tom Brady, and it's like, Saquon, where do you get that from? Because Tom's the greatest example of this, and at least Saquon is this year. We know how great this Philadelphia roster is. That goes without saying. I think they're the second best roster in football. Detroit's not far off, particularly on the offensive side of the ball. San Francisco, when healthy, I still think is just stacked. Philadelphia, top to bottom, there really isn't a big flaw that, you could hone in on. Even the quote-unquote weak link that some see Jalen Hurts as, Jalen Hurts is pretty good against Washington. I've been hard on Jalen. Jalen looked really good against Washington, particularly throwing the football in key situations. But there is still an element of, not in this game against Washington, because they're a much more talented team than Washington, but there still is the element of, we saw it at the end of the Rams game, where it's like, okay, Jalen Hurts tends to have injury concerns at this stage of the year. A.J. Brown, you never know where he's at emotionally. Nick Sirianni, the same applies with him. And unfortunately, he's the guy that coaches the darn game. Almost blew it big time against the Rams in multiple key spots. But then it's just turn around, get the ball. Saquon Barkley takes the house. I said he was similar to Brady in the sense that New England was, we didn't talk about it enough at the time. I didn't have a show until the last year Brady was there. But that last 4 years that Brady was in New England, it was kind of chaotic. Like, we talked about him, but we didn't realize how much Brady and Belichick's relationship had kind of deteriorated toward the end as we grew to learn in books, documentaries, etc., reporting, great journalism in that Boston, New England area. Not only to mention that the roster in New England the last few years Brady was there, and I hammered this in 2019, was terrible. It was a bad roster. The last couple of years Brady was with the Patriots, particularly on the offensive side of the ball. And Brady covered up for that because he's Brady. There's no other explanation for it. Saquon Barkley is a win away. Hey, let me put it this way. A great performance in a win away from having a very legitimate argument that he had the greatest running back season in NFL history. Now, I think Terrell Davis in 1998 with the Denver Broncos, when that was John Elway's first Super Bowl, when Elway finally broke through toward the end of his career, the first of the back-to-back Denver Super Bowls. They won that one against Favre and the Packers. Terrell Davis was unreal that season in Denver. We can show you what Saquon Barkley's done this season. It's fewer touchdowns, I think it's like 6 fewer touchdowns, but almost identical. So 24 in the regular season and playoffs this year. Saquon Barkley, 2,447 rush yards, which is only 29 behind Terrell Davis on 59 fewer attempts, by the way. So he's almost certainly, knock on wood, God forbid he gets hurt, going to break that for single season rush yards. 128 yards per game, 6 yards a carry, and 18 rush touchdowns. And by the way, keep in mind, you got tush push that took a lot of touchdowns away from Saquon Barkley. Otherwise, he maybe could have passed Terrell Davis. So we're having that conversation with him there. But with Philadelphia, it is what this game is doing. I remember talking about this, actually. I literally did a segment on this when the last time we saw Kansas City and Philly in the Super Bowl. I did a segment to start the show that day. I said, right before the game was played, I said, this game is going to shape how teams view constructing a championship roster. Because we knew Mahomes was the better quarterback and Philly had the better roster. And like Jalen was almost MVP that year, but we knew Mahomes was better, all of that. If Philly won, it was going to be, hey, we can have a quarterback who's not A+ and can be Superman every play. Mahomes, Allen, Lamar, Burrow, like Jaden Daniels potentially, maybe CJ Stroud. All of those guys, we cannot have that if we're able to put an all-star roster together. Howie Roseman has done an incredible job of doing so in Philly. And if the Chiefs win, we can get there if we got the all-star roster, but we better have that dude at quarterback. Now, the Niners came close to doing that with I think a significantly lesser version of Jalen Hurts, different stylistically, obviously, in Brock Purdy. Heck, the Niners almost did with Garoppolo. It can be done. It's just, I think, a little bit harder to do because there's so many more holes you have to fill if you have a B+ and below quarterback as opposed to somebody, one of the guys that I mentioned, one of the 4 best quarterbacks. And certainly Mahomes is in a category of his own. It is what Philadelphia is doing in some ways has almost broken what the conventional wisdom is in the NFL. You have a great coach, you got to have a great quarterback, you got to have at least one of each. So like even in Buffalo, like I think Sean McDermott's a good coach, not great, and Josh Allen's a great quarterback. You got to at least have that. In Philadelphia, with respect to Jalen Hurts, I gotta admit, I still don't think he's a great quarterback. A really good one, yes. Situationally, yeah. Hey, I mean, he's been solid in those moments. And Nick Sirianni, folks, Since he took the Philadelphia job, I saw a stat today. He is tied with Sean McDermott, ironically, a coach I just mentioned, for second in terms of win percentage to Andy Reid. So you got the two coaches with the best winning percentages squaring off in Super Bowl 59. And I got to admit, obviously Sirianni's no Andy Reid, but it's like, yeah, I still don't think he's great. When Sirianni does well, and I've said this before, he assembles really good coaching staffs. At least the defensive side he did this year. Kellen Moore, I still have massive questions. It helps when you have, Saquon Barkley in the backfield behind the best or second best O-line in the league. Not a whole lot of creativity with the Philadelphia Eagles all season long. That's not what Kellen Moore is known for. And then in terms of Sirianni, what does he do? Other than putting together staffs, which is big, what does he do? There's almost you know what it is? It's almost like there's an Ed Orgeron feel with this Philadelphia Eagles team. Ed Orgeron, who was the coach of that all-time great 2019 LSU team with Joe Burrow, Chase, Jefferson, all of those guys, where if we look at that LSU team, we're like, Ed Orgeron, take away the Louisiana Cajun Go Tigers thing out of it. Orgeron's like the seventh or eighth thing at the most that we think of when you think about the LSU team. You think Burrow, you think Jefferson, Chase. I think of Joe Brady. Orgeron's not even the first coach I think of when I think of of that LSU team. Sirianni, outside of the antics, isn't really the first coach I think of with Philadelphia. It's Vic Fangio. And what he's done with this Eagles defense, which is top 3 in just about every major statistical category. And so, listen, I still think there's a hole there. I still think if this is a close game, which we've seen, by the way, 2 of the 3 Eagles playoff games, they've smoked teams. They didn't really smoke Green Bay. Green Bay just did not show up to the party. Green Bay looked defeated from those 2 losses to at the end of the year. Green Bay was DOA. And then Washington, they're just better than Washington. Washington put up a fight, but the turnovers killed them. But that game against the Rams, you remember watching that game? When Stafford's got the ball in his hands, Rams are driving, Puka's just made the big catch down the field. You're like, Stafford may be about to do this, and like Sirianni could be on a flaming hot seat right now for blowing a 13-point fourth quarter lead. And instead, Jalen Carter did Jalen Carter things, and that was that. So if they're in a close game against Kansas City, which Kansas City is kind of amazing, they've got the all-time record for consecutive one-score games streak alive. I don't really trust them. I'm not going to lie. I think if we're going to talk about a weak link with Philly, that's your weak link. Sirianni's contribution is assembling a tremendous coaching staff that is in complete tandem with an outstanding roster that Howie Roseman has put together. That's it. Doesn't call plays. He's an offensive guy, doesn't call plays. The one time he did try to call offensive plays wasn't very good. Eagles got off to like a 3-6 start at the start of his rookie year. He's deferred ever since to Steichen and then down the road now to Kellen Moore. And so that's kind of the thing with Philly. So I know it sounds like I'm raining the Eagles parade. That's kind of where I'm at with Philadelphia. But we'll see. Let's see what we got in the comments here. EJ Savage, make sure you mention the fact that the Eagles had 7 rushing touchdowns against the Commanders, which is more than the Dallas Cowboys had all season. Well, I just mentioned it, so there you go. It is remarkable. By the way, we'll get to the Cowboys in just a second. That's actually our very next topic. Parnell, who's a Washington fan, a diehard Washington fan for that matter. The future is the beginning for Washington. I hope Eagles fans get mad when they lose in the Super Bowl. I have the Eagles winning. Wow. But I want to see them lose because of how annoying the fans are. Before I get to your next comment, Parnell, you've got the Eagles win. Listen, I'll predict next week. I think people probably have a lean for where I'm going to go. At this point, I don't know why folks doubt Kansas City, but hey, okay. Parnell, Washington needs to get O-line to protect Jaden. They do. Again, O-line and defense, no question. Parnell, I would say Saquon more CMC less. You're saying comparable? Because, yeah, their stats are comparable. I mean, statistically, Barkley had a better – Saquon was amazing last year. Barkley's actually been statistically better this year, comparable to that of Terrell Davis in 98. What do we got? EJ Daniels was such a difficult scout for me because he had a great O-line, 2 of the top 4 receivers in the draft, a solid tight end, and he was horrible at taking hits and not sliding. And that's in and of itself, that last point, EJ, is a problem. It's especially a problem when you're as slight as he is. I'm not going to go skinny because he's not skinny, but it wouldn't hurt him to put on a little bit of muscle. Now, the downside is Lamar Jackson's another guy, Lamar, who Jaden is compared to. is another guy who I wouldn't go slight for Lamar, but there was a time where Lamar bulked up and Lamar's like, I'm going to lose this weight because he felt like it hampered his rushing ability. Jaden will have to make the decision with his trainer and whatnot, but that's, I mean, it's a fair critique. I just thought with his dual threat ability, with his accuracy down the field, I thought that would translate, especially in Washington with Kingsbury. Kingsbury's not a very good head coach. He's a tremendous play caller as an OC. So Washington's going to be here to stay. There's no question about that. What else we have? My man John Rivera in the comment section. I will say, John, who's a diehard Jets fan, subscribe to Fan Perspective. If you're out there, subscribe to his podcast, Fan Perspective Podcast. The more stuff I watch of Aaron Glenn with the Jets, and I can't even say I've bagged on the Jets. I've just told the truth about the Jets. They're a crap organization who got held hostage by a crap locker room guy. But I've been an Aaron Glenn fan for a while. I'm telling you, if Woody Johnson allows him to, I think he can turn it around. I do. Now, he's going to need to get Aaron out of the building because all of the positive energy and the motivation, and I've said Aaron Glenn is of the two, Aaron Glenn and Ben Johnson. Aaron Glenn's far more similar to Dan Campbell just in terms of his overall approach. Again, former player. And I think Ben's going to be successful in Chicago, but that Ben Johnson's more cut from the Dan Campbell cloth as it pertains to being a culture guy. You got to get Aaron out of the building to be able to not, in some ways, cancel out that good vibes and good energy. I think he can turn it around. I really, really do. They got to get the quarterback, and I don't necessarily think they're going to get it in this draft. We'll see. I like him a lot. I really, really do, John. I think if Woody allows him to, I think you've got your guy. Parnell. In terms of impact and stats, yes, Saquon to CMC. I have the Eagles because I don't see Sirianni taking the ball out of Saquon's hands like Kyle Shanahan did with Christian McCaffrey. That is fair. I defended Shanahan after my biggest criticism of Shanahan against Kansas City was not knowing the overtime rules. Like that. I remember watching that game and when the Niners won the coin toss and they elected to get the ball. I'm like, you do know the rules changed like 2 years ago, Kyle, right? Like that was his big error. But I thought he was aggressive. I thought the trick plays that they ran, I thought he just went all out. If we're going to go down, we're going to go down swinging because we have the significantly inferior quarterback. That's fair. You can make a case that in some spots in the middle of the Rams game, the one I keep harping back to, that I thought the Rams were a little bit better. Turnovers killed them. I thought there were moments in that game where they would kind of take the ball to Saquon's hand, drop Jalen Hurts back. It's like, dude, you got this monster wearing 26 in the backfield. Give him the ball. So we'll see. That matchup is going to be fascinating to watch. There's no question about it. Also, don't know what the over-under is for Dallas Goedert receiving yards. Take the over. That's kind of the weak point of Kansas City's defense. They're not very good against tight ends. So I would, whatever sports book, FanDuel, DraftKings, any of them, take the over on Dallas Goedert receiving yards. I'm just putting that out there. Okay. So we segue from an all-time dynasty to an incredibly run franchise who's back in another Super Bowl to what has now become arguably the third worst run franchise in the National Football League. That would be the Dallas Cowboys. I think the worst run franchise is the Cleveland Browns. Number 2 is the Jets. Number 3 is the Dallas Cowboys. So in a news dump, in a Friday night, 10 p.m. Eastern news dump, they hire Brian Schottenheimer to be the team's 10th head coach in franchise history. So Schottenheimer gets hired. Schottenheimer was Mike McCarthy's offensive coordinator for the last 2 seasons. He is obviously the son of the legendary Marty Schottenheimer, who, God rest his soul, was, people like Marty can never win the big game. Marty Schottenheimer was a phenomenal coach. I think people back from that time know. Brian Schottenheimer, this is his first opportunity to be a head coach in the NFL. And they had a press conference in Dallas yesterday. There were so many just bizarre moments from that press conference yesterday at the Star in Texas that I couldn't narrow it down to just one clip. I'll simply just read the transcript for some of these. But so Jerry Jones was asked about hiring Brian Schottenheimer and what it meant. And this was his answer. I kid you not, word for word. And I quote, "In the almost 35 years that I've been involved with the Dallas Cowboys, I've only missed one Senior Bowl. 35 years. And I think I missed one combine in 35 years. At the NFL, over the last 4 to 5 years, the NFL, we want to come in a day early so that we can visit with prospective coaches for the future of my team and any other teams. In 35 years, I don't think I've ever visited with the coach, but with what in my heart and mind, I wasn't having an interview. I don't think I've ever had a coach visit with me that wasn't prospectively thinking maybe someday our paths might cross. I've been around a lot of coaches. As a matter of fact, I wanted to be a coach, except I wanted to live better than I thought the coaches lived." End quote. He was also asked about moving on from Mike McCarthy, Jerry Jones, and I quote, "It was time for a change. We spent 5 days getting to come to that decision. One of the reasons we came to that decision was because this decision was available to us." End quote. All right. For those that didn't know, Brian Schottenheimer did not call plays in Dallas. That was Mike McCarthy's job. Now, I've always said about McCarthy, he is not as bad as his critics say he is. He is not as great as his fans say that he is. And Mike McCarthy doesn't have that many fanboys, so to speak, and the Cowboys fan base of the media, whatnot, but he certainly has his defenders. I've always considered myself very lukewarm on McCarthy. I think he's somewhere around the 13th, 14th best coach in the NFL. I think he has a history, a track record that says he is one of 5 coaches in NFL history to make 8 straight postseasons with the same team. I think it was like Tom Landry, Belichick, Shula might have been in there, and I'm forgetting Andy Reid as well. I think I'm almost certain Don Shula was in that. And it was Chuck Noll. It wasn't Don Shula, it was Chuck Noll and Mike McCarthy. So for all his flaws, he has that in his resume. And he called plays, and for what it's worth, he called plays for Dak Prescott to be second runner-up for MVP to Lamar Jackson in the 2023 season, Dak's last healthy year. In the 3 fully healthy seasons Dak Prescott's had, he's top 5 in virtually every quarterback statistic as it relates to pass yards per game, passer rating, completion percentage, touchdown interception, all of that. Marty Schottenheimer didn't call plays. And what Marty Schottenheimer is a validation of the Jerry Jones football business model. That's what he is. Because 2 weeks ago, I was going to do a segment on the Deion Sanders rumors, because at the time, 2 weeks ago, it was the story in the NFL, even over a lot of the playoff games. It was, man, Dallas moves on from McCarthy, and Deion Sanders may be interested. As a matter of fact, some of the reporting from Ed Werder, as trusted a reporter as you could have in Dallas, he said, hey, Jerry's interested in Deion. Deion's interested in the Cowboys. To which I would have said, had the internet not had other ideas, I would have said on the show 2 weeks ago, that sounds cool. Why haven't they interviewed? Why has Deion Sanders not been interviewed by the Cowboys? If there's mutual interest, you'd think that. I mean, I don't know. Just from a let's use a relationship analogy. I don't know if there's what situation do you have? Well, one person is kind of into the other, and then the other person is into that person, and they never go on a date. Middle school prom, I guess. I mean, I don't know. That's not usually how it works. It was never going to happen because it was all just a big, fat press tour for Jerry Jones. It was an opportunity with the Dallas Cowboys not in the playoffs this year, off a 7-10 season, virtually eliminated. They were mathematically eliminated toward the end of the year, but virtually eliminated the second Dak Prescott's hamstring gave out. Jerry had to steal the headlines from the NFL playoffs. Usually Jerry's Cowboys are in it, so they can steal it by default. And it's a validation of the Jones football business model. He fired Jimmy Johnson. People seem to forget this is the same guy who did something that if it happened today, listen, I wasn't around in 1994. I don't remember. I wasn't around for it. I don't know. But if it happened today, where the Kansas City Chiefs happened last year, let's say 12 months ago, Kansas City Chiefs beat the 49ers in the Super Bowl, and bam, the Hunt family axes Andy Reid. It would have been the biggest OMG, WTF, whatever phrase you want to use. What is happening in Kansas City? Fired him just because he wanted credit and because Jerry Jones wanted control over personnel, over over the business aspect of the Dallas Cowboys, which you already had control of that anyway. The PR aspect of the Dallas Cowboys, where Jimmy got credit, Troy got credit, playmaker Michael Irvin got credit, Emmitt Smith got credit, offensive line, Great Wall in Dallas got credit, Charles Haley and eventually Deion Sanders got credit. And Jerry didn't like that. He's a TV star. Heck, we saw him. My dad's a huge fan of a very successful show, Landman. We saw Jerry Jones on Landman. He was really good. Matter of fact, I remember I saw the clip on Twitter. I was like, gosh darn, Jerry Jones should have gone into acting. He's great. He's fantastic. That's who he is. He is all about the show. I've always said this. If you gave Jerry Jones the option, you said, I can guarantee you, Mr. Jones, that you will win a Super Bowl in the next 5 years. You'll be around for it. The Dallas Cowboys, with you as the owner and general manager, will win the Super Bowl. And you'll kind of play a boring brand of football. You won't get us talked about as much as maybe like a Kansas City or a 49ers or a Philly or Buffalo or Baltimore, teams like that. But you'll get one. Maybe two. You'll get two. That, or you will continue to be the most talked about team in professional sports, the most marketable team in professional sports in the world, by the way. He would take that option. By the way, with no guarantee of winning a Super Bowl, he'd take that all day, every day, every single time, without fail. Dave Campo, Chan Gailey, Jason Garrett, Wade Phillips, to a lesser degree, Mike McCarthy, and now Brian Schottenheimer, who had no offers to coach anywhere else. People were going after Ben Johnson and Mike Vrabel and Aaron Glenn. And the Saints might close the deal with Kellen Moore. That's who teams were going after. Heck, Belichick, before he took the North Carolina job, was supposed to be the candidate. 74-year-old Pete Carroll was a candidate. All of these guys were considered to be, and Schottenheimer was not one of them. At this point, if you're going to hire Schottenheimer, why'd you move on from McCarthy? Because Jerry Jones is a man who wants to control the narrative, who is, I've heard comparisons, and I've hesitated to do this, but I understand where people are coming from now completely. Is Jerry Jones has shifted in the phase of his career, in his life, in some ways that Al Davis did with the at the time with the Oakland Raiders. Al Davis at one time was viewed as a visionary, as a maverick, as a guy who was ahead of the curve in many areas on what the future of the NFL was and needed to look like. That was Jerry Jones. As recently as like 8-9 years ago, it was Jerry's idea, at least he pushed for as much as anybody, to put an NFL team in Los Angeles, California. That was Jerry Jones. He's, in some ways, Jerry has been a visionary. He is the guy. For years it was kind of said that, in NFL circles, at these owners' meetings, they have the owners' meetings every offseason, that the 32 owners, or I guess 31 owners, would show up, and there'd be two guys they'd go to. They go to Bob Kraft in New England in the middle of the Patriots dynasty because he won more than anybody. So hey, Kraft, give us a little, that secret sauce. What's the secret to winning? It's like, I don't know, dude. We have Tom Brady. That helps. And then they went to Jerry Jones. It certainly wasn't for the winning, but for the business aspect of it, Jerry historically has been brilliant. In terms of the business of the NFL, Jerry has been outstanding. It's why he's in Canton, Ohio today. Deservedly so. But toward the end of Al Davis's life, God rest his soul, there were some weird moves. Remember was it Darius Hayward-Bay? I think that was the receiver's name that the Raiders took in the first round. I think Mike Mayock, who eventually became the GM of the Raiders, said, this dude is like a 7th-round pick in my mock draft. What are they doing? There was weird draft picks, coach moves, and the Raiders deteriorated from a proud, iconic NFL blue blood franchise into what they remain today, and which is a laughingstock. We'll see if Pete Carroll can turn it around. And that's what Dallas is. Dallas is now what the Raiders were about 13, 14 years ago. A once proud, iconic blue blood brand that is now the third poorest run organization in the NFL, only in my view, to the New York Jets and to the Cleveland Browns. That's who they are. And for the record, I'm about to show a graphic. It looks like a little bit of a mess at first, but just follow me here, up and down, from left to right. Now that Washington, this is a little bit of a delayed graphic, but since Washington got to the NFC title game, we can show you the graphic. Teams that have been to the conference championship game more recently, and how many times they've done it, by the way, than the Dallas Cowboys. Go. Here's your graphic. Patriots did it 14 times, which is insane. So the Patriots went to 14 NFC or AFC title games for the Cowboys have went to 1. Packers did it 9 times. Niners and Eagles 8. Chiefs and Steelers 7. Broncos and Ravens 8. The Colts, Falcons, Panthers, Rams, and Vikings have done it 4 times. The Bucks, Giants, Jaguars. The Jaguars for crying out loud. The Jets for crying out loud. The Saints, the Seahawks, and the Titans have gone 3 times. Bengals, Cardinals, Raiders, Bears, and Bills have gone twice. And then Washington, the Chargers, and the Detroit Lions have gone to the conference title game once, but still more recently than America's team, the Dallas Cowboys. It is. I thought I was going to kill him more. I did. I never for a second bought the Deion Sanders rumors because you know what? Hiring Deion Sanders would have been a precedent breaker. Jerry has had, I should say, a precedent breaker because you could say Bill Parcells sort of was the precedent breaker because Bill Parcells cowers down to no man. But even he and Jerry had the dispute over T.O. And Bill Parcells was gone and has never coached the NFL again. Deion Sanders would have broken every single rule that Jerry Jones has had running the football in Dallas for 30 years. Would have broken every rule. A guy who is going to be a bigger face and name than I am. A guy who is, if and when we succeed, Deion will get the credit before Dak, before Micah, before anybody, and certainly before me. It simply was not going to materialize. It was never going to happen. Because you know what Deion Sanders is going to want to do, and rightfully so, by the way, if he becomes the head coach of the Cowboys, want control over personnel. Nobody wants control of personnel more than one Gerald Wayne Jones. So, am I shocked by the hire of Brian Schottenheimer? No. Brian Schottenheimer is, and again, God bless him. For his sake, I hope he does well. For Dak's sake, I'm a Dak guy. I hope he does well. But he is simply just add him to the list of names of guys who were there so they could beat Jerry. There's one last point I want to make before I move on and get to the comments because I see I got some comments here. There is so many times in that press conference yesterday, Jerry Jones mentioned the word deference. Is that Marty Schottenheimer, because he's been just go to his Wikipedia page and see all the jobs he's held. I'm not trying to pick on Brian Schottenheimer. My bad, Brian Schottenheimer. Checking all the places Brian Schottenheimer's went. He's been everywhere. He's Johnny Cash. He's been everywhere, man. Jerry Jones specifically sort of alluded to that and said he's had deference to guys above him his whole career. Deference. Is Jerry Jones not alluding to the fact? And he's going to have deference to me too. He's going to defer to me too. And thus, why the Dallas Cowboys have been, continue to be, and under the Jones family, Jerry or Steven, will always be a poorly run business and a football team that will continue to disappoint and leave us all kind of scratching our heads as to why we didn't get a little bit more than what we got. Check the comments here. What do we have up in here? Parnell, Commanders fan. He probably loves this. Jerry Jones ain't changing. He was never going to hire Prime or Pete Carroll. Jerry cares about money and headlines, which is why I didn't report a Prime Pete Carroll because of benefiting. In 2009, he was talking about the Raiders here. The Raiders drafted Hayward Bay over Michael Crabtree. John. Thank you, John Rivera. He said, yeah, left Dallas at the right time, LOL. Listen, again, this has been to start with our Chiefs segment, this has been, I will openly admit it, this has been the Bryson Was Right show. This might be a good sort of cap on it in the sense that for those that don't know the story, I'll keep it brief. I was a Cowboys fan growing up my whole life, and they drafted a guy in 2016 who I was a massive fan of, thought he could be, honest to God, before he was drafted in the NFL, could be a franchise quarterback in the NFL named Rain Dakota Prescott, better known as Dak. And when they drafted him, I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. He's going to do it with my team. This is going to be awesome. And when the contract stuff happened, the first go around in 2020, Dak was frantic. When I saw quarterbacks that were not as good as Dak, Jared Goff, Carson Wentz got a deal before Dak Prescott. I'm like, okay, what is Jerry doing? And then Dak breaks his ankle in 2020. I said, I'm done. Because it was so emotional the moment. It's like, I'm done. This guy, and we the writing was on the ball prior to that, certainly. that Jerry was a headlines guy, not a wins guy. But it's only gotten worse since. Even I didn't think it would get this bad. It's why I became a Steelers fan. I took like a 2-year break. I rooted for the Cowboys, and I still root for the Cowboys because of Dak. But it's why I became a Steelers fan. For all the Steelers' faults, they're not even close to what this disaster circus is. Parnell. Jerry would have a better chance hiring Brandon Staley. Gosh, that would be bad. That'd be even worse. For as bad as I think the Schottenheimer hire could be, Brandon Staley would be worse. That was the worst coach of football he's there, man. And nothing personal, but that guy, oof. It was brutal. John, Adam Silver suggesting 10-minute quarters. I did see this. What do you think? So basically what Silver was saying is that, hey, they do 4 10-minute quarters everywhere else. They do it in the WNBA. They do it overseas. They do it in the Olympics. In the Olympics, 4 10-minute quarters. I don't think the problem with the NBA, some of the problems they face is related to, the games are too long. That was baseball's problem. Major League Baseball and the the pitch clock, all of the old timers and the diehards and the precious people, whatever you want to call them. We're like, this messes with the integrity of the game. It's like, no, it actually makes games quicker. Could potentially, and by the way, Manfred then banned the shift, made the base bigger. Like, it's going to encourage steals, going to encourage better situational baseball. This is great for the sport. That's the 48-minute game is not the problem with the NBA. Now, I think they should shorten the season. Yes, if it were me, 72 games. So 65 to 72 games would be what I would do. 82's a little too many. Silver's never going to do that because for business purposes, he shouldn't do that because why would I cut, almost a quarter out of my season essentially when it's really beneficial to play these games, put butts in seats, TV deals, all of those things. So I would not do it. I don't really get why he's suggesting. Maybe just to keep pace with the world, but I don't know. The world may have us beat. The world in basketball may have the United States beat. Not as of now. Steph Curry and LeBron James and KD ensured that didn't happen. But 2028, I was actually thinking about that. 2028 Olympics, I ain't gonna lie. I'm nervous. I'm nervous for the old red, white, and blue to see what we do in men's basketball. And where's that? Oh, it's in Los Angeles. It's on our home soil. Whew. Don't blow this, guys. Come on. Shoot, the women almost got beat too, by the way. Both the women and the men almost lost in the gold medal game. Last comment, then we'll move on to a basketball story, ironically. Parnell, isn't it shocking that every team in the NFC East has made it to the conference championship game except Dallas? Last time for Dallas is 1995. I'll do you one better, my friend. Try every team in the NFC has made it more recently than the Dallas Cowboys. I think the only ones that haven't done it are the Browns, who are the other teams? The Dolphins haven't done it. I actually wrote this down, I think, earlier in my notes. If I could pull this up in here to make sure we got. Let's see. It was. Oh, I don't have it. I thought I wrote it down. I don't know. I know it was the Dolphins haven't been to the NFC title game, or AFC title game rather. The Browns haven't done it, and I'm forgetting who the other team was. It's lost off the top of my head. So, shifting now to a basketball story. And this one isn't being talked about that much, but just as reason I'm talking about it is because it's something I've literally hyped up on the show since last summer. And I wasn't just doing it because it was July and there was no training camp in the NFL. There was no NBA. Baseball was like in the All-Star break, and it was just a dead period. It's not the only reason I brought up this story. I brought it up because it's something that I not only thought was going to happen, but what I desperately wanted to happen is All-Star Weekend, February 2025, in the house, the Golden House built by the Golden Man, Steph Curry in Golden State. My Warriors hosting the All-Star game at the Chase Center this year. Let's go. And the biggest moment was not going to be the three-point contest. It darn sure won't be the skills competition, which they need to get rid of. Nobody cares about that one. Or the slam dunk contest. It was going to be an enhanced version of what we saw a year ago. A year ago, we saw Steph Curry versus Sabrina Ionescu in a three-point shootout. And I said, this year, the stories galore. We put the Splash Brothers back together. Klay Thompson's a Dallas Maverick. We put the Splash Brothers back together. Steph and Clay versus the woman who did it last year, Sabrina Ionescu, with maybe the biggest star, I should say the biggest star, but certainly the one that has the highest upside of stardom in terms of men's and women's basketball, Caitlin Clark. Have a shootout with Steph and Clay versus Sabrina and Caitlin. It is something that I thought was going to happen, and today we got the news from her representatives, Caitlin's representatives. She will not compete in such a contest for two reasons. A, they said she won her three-point contest. They were a little bit contradictory. The first report that came out, and I don't know if this is true, said that she wanted to, her shooting regimen does not involve shooting off a rack, which you're obviously doing a three-point shooting contest. The next thing that came out said she wants her first three-point contest to be at the WNBA All-Star Game, which, for the record, totally respect that. I totally get that. I just wanted to say it really broke my heart because I thought it could be productive and great for the NBA and the WNBA obviously as well on a number of fronts, where part of the issue, certainly prior to Caitlin Clark, that the WNBA had for a long time, is as simple as the most important games of their season happen during football. WNBA playoffs, September. Finals are usually played in early to mid-October. That's smack dab at the beginning of fever pitch of NFL hype to start the year. And college football as well, by the way, which we know has just gotten bigger and bigger over the years. And so that's part of the problem that they face. So I was like, man, football's over on both fronts, college, NFL, baseball's started yet, and you put potentially the biggest star in the sport, not named Steph Curry or LeBron James, honest to God, maybe Wemby. You put her on primetime Saturday night All-Star Weekend against Steph and Clay, the old Splash Brothers. She pairs up with Sabrina Ionescu. Because, by the way, last year, it was the most beloved moment of the All-Star contest because it was new, it was innovative. It was like, oh, this works. And for the record, Sabrina came that close to beating Steph. Steph had to hit like his last one or two shots in order to edge her out. And so I just think that it was, listen, Caitlin's with State Farm. We see her on the commercials with Jake in the khakis. She is as big of a superstar as we have in sports. You know, men's, women's, WNBA, NBA, basketball in general. I think this was a kind of a golden opportunity. Now, devil's advocate would say, well, you could do it next year. You could put the Splash Brothers together next year and have her and Sabrina next year, because then Caitlin will have done her first three-point contest in the WNBA, which she wants to do, which I totally respect and get. The downside is just, I guess maybe this is just me as a selfish Warriors fan, is like, yeah, but we also could have gotten the Splash Brothers in the Bay Area. And so, Clay would have gotten an ovation. Like, I think it was a missed opportunity. That's all I'm going to say. So I saw that. I staked my claim to it. By the way, maybe this is a fitting in for the Bryson Was Right show to I missed that one because I all but guaranteed from July on, we're going to get Caitlin, Sabrina versus Steph and Clay, and that didn't happen. So you disappointed me, Caitlin. Still a fan here, so go keep crushing it. We all know what a baller she is. All right. That is all the time we have for today's show. Appreciate everybody stopping by. As always, be sure to catch Carving Up Live next week. Again, we will give you the date and time as time goes on. Obviously, with me in Florida with the Disney College program, the schedule's a little bit kind of all over the place. And so we'll give you updates in terms of what the show's going to be next week. We'll absolutely, without a shadow of a doubt, do a Super Bowl preview show. I'll do my pick for the game, storylines going into the game. I teased early on the show that I'll do a segment breaking down the ridiculous notion that the refs are helping the Chiefs win games or are in the bag for the Chiefs. We'll have a ton to talk about next week. Super Bowl hype up preview. Man, it is crazy how fast this NFL season's flying by, and we're flown by, and we're down to one game. Eagles out of the NFC, back-to-back champion Chiefs looking for the first ever three-peat Super Bowl out of the AFC. So get to that on next week's show. So stay tuned. We'll give you more information with that on social media. So follow me on Instagram at Carving Up Podcast, on Twitter at Carving Up Pod. And most importantly, be sure to take 2 seconds out of your day, hit that big red subscribe button down there because it helps the channel grow exponentially. Be sure to tell your friends about it, your fam about it, everybody you know about it. except for your sleeping cat, of which, by the way, I miss mine dearly in Tennessee. My man Nealon, my little buddy. But please be sure to subscribe to Carving It Up, and just importantly, be sure to go subscribe to the Grid Network. That is GRYD, the Grid Podcast Network, right here in YouTube, as well as any everywhere that you get your favorite podcast, be it Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, any and everywhere that you get your favorite podcast. You can find us at the Grid Network, where we dare to be different. And in about a half hour, about 40 minutes more accurately, check out the 8 o'clock spot. Put up the logo right there for me, right there. 8 o'clock spot live at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific time on the Grid's YouTube channel. It will be hosted by my man, Mike Guido, who is still, Mike calls himself a Cowboys fan. Mike's a Bills fan. He can say it. He's a Bills fan. He's also a big Cavs and Yankees fan, which I try to look past, but it's hard. And he's a Florida fan too, which I found out like 3 months ago. That really broke my heart, Mike. It hurt. But he's been hosting the show tonight. He's going to do a fantastic job. I think we got Arthur Hurst and Paris Brown. Be sure to check out the show tonight, versus night on the Grid Network, 8 o'clock spot. Tune in about 40 minutes from now. You will not be disappointed by what you see on that show tonight. All right, we'll see y'all next week. Super Bowl preview. Cannot wait for everybody. Stay safe out there. God bless y'all. And peace out. I told you I was running Kansas City. Come on now. Thanks so much for watching the show on YouTube, and be sure to go click that big red subscribe button and check out the other clips and full shows from Carving It Up Live, as well as our other incredible content creators here on the Grid Network.